Welcome everyone. There are 92 people and counting on this webinar today. So we just have a very small presentation with an agenda, but most of the time today we'll be spending on discussing with you in small groups and move forwards in the terms of the discussion that we had before. Thank you very much for joining us today. Today, we're going to give you some highlights of the survey results, just to note that we have not had a chance yet to look at all the comments that you've made on the survey. And then we're going to hear from Tariq Khokar from the Wellcome Trust. And as I said, most of the meeting will be through breakout groups. And for each breakout groups, we will have facilitators that will be responsible to come back and feedback the discussions that they had within the groups. And we will allow for some time just for any AOB or just also to get you involved on the process. But let's start with the good news. We had 216 people responding to our survey. The survey had three main questions. One is whether people agreed with this overall goal of having a process that was open and equitable, but also global. And in fact, between the ones, sorry about that, too fast, that strongly agree and agreed, we had 96% of the 216 respondents saying that they agreed with the overall statement that was made for the thing. So the second thing that we asked for is purpose. And we had a series of statements in terms of purpose, starting with that we as an evidence synthesis community need a radically more relevant, timely, and affordable way of producing evidence synthesis. We need to be global. We need to support all topic areas. We need to use technology more reliably. And we have to have a process that is a good value for money. And again, 94% of you responded, of the people that responded to the survey agreed or strongly agreed with these purpose statements. The third one was about the process. This it's a beginning of a conversation, but what we wanted to do is to make sure that you would agree with what we are proposing. That is a balanced participation by region, sector, and resource settings, 5 working groups and 5 in planning groups, and that is really the core of the discussion today. With regular updates to you, each one of these working groups will have 2 co-chairs, with one of them being, at least one of them being from low mid-income settings, and a steering group that involves evidence producers, users, and funders. And again, 88% either strongly agree or agree with this process. So this is really very important for us because we wanted to be able to collaborate and we wanted to be able to do it with you. And so we're very grateful. We're also mindful that there was, as I mentioned in the beginning, a number of comments, and these comments now will be discussed, and we'll use the comments to really feed our Q&A that will be on the website. So nothing, just bear with us in terms of time, but we very much we're very grateful for your participation on this process. And before I go to today's discussions, I'd like to welcome Tariq. He is going to speak to us on behalf of Wellcome. And we're very grateful, Tariq, for you to spend your time, and we'll also record this conversation so that we can then share with individuals that are not participating on this meeting. Over to you, Tariq.
Thanks so much, Carla. It's a pleasure to be here and to see you all. For those who don't know me, I'm the head of data for science and health at the Wellcome Trust, which is a cross-cutting department that thinks about issues of data science, and artificial intelligence across our strategy. And I'll confess, I'm not a native of this land. The evidence synthesis community has always been one that I've realized is extraordinarily important, but it's not one I'm deeply familiar with. But I'm grateful for the expertise we have in our team. Isabel Fletcher, who I'm sure many of you know. I'm also very pleased to be working with John Lavis as an expert advisor to us. So it's sort of through them that I'm getting my sort of introduction and connection to the world. But I hope this is the first of many conversations I'll be having with this group and you individually. I definitely don't need 10 minutes. I don't sort of buckle in for a big speech from me. But I just wanted to cover a couple of things. So, I mean, firstly, the first slide you showed, Carla. It's great to see the level of support for a kind of open, equitable, participatory planning process. So when we launched the catchily titled Evidence Synthesis Infrastructure Collaborative, or ESIC as the acronym goes, it was framed as this sort of £45 million over 5-year investment, but we deliberately didn't specify who is the money going to, what are the mechanisms going to be, what are the mechanisms that we're going to use. We definitely wanted to align with the sort of 5 key components that you're all sort of familiar with, but at no point did we want to presuppose what the community needs or what the community is going to prioritize. That's really where you all come in. So we're really grateful to see the sort of the process that you're embarking on. I understand there's a program of sort of working groups and planning groups, and you're prioritizing, diversity of membership and sort of inclusion. So from our point of view, that's exactly what we want to see. And we want to understand, what does the community need from a new program of infrastructure investment. The only other thing I'll say on the evidence synthesis infrastructure collaborative is what one role that Wellcome is trying to play is bringing together other funders who are interested in this space. So we saw that the ESRC also made an announcement at the same time in this area. But as you can imagine, there are lots of philanthropic and government funders around the world who are either interested in domain-specific evidence synthesis initiatives, or indeed could be brought to be interested in more foundational infrastructure plays. So we think if we can come up with a clear architecture and rationale for this sort of infrastructure approach to investment, Wellcome can play a role in coordinating that so it's best targeted and most productive. I'll finish by just saying a couple of things. So one, while I said we've not allocated any funding to date, the 3 things that are in motion are planning grants. So I think we're very keen to make a planning grant to folks in this group to support the work that you're already kind of embarking on. I imagine we'll do something similar for the GSDGSC. Again, if there's a quick way of saying that, let me know in the comments. And we're hoping that we can put together an event early to middle of next year, and we'll try and get funding going for that. So very keen to kind of get the ball rolling with these sorts of planning grants and money to kind of help the community come together and figure out what the asks are and what the priorities are. But beyond that, no sort of funding allocated. And then what I'll finish by saying is, long term, it's pretty clear to me that the sort of distribution of resources is going to include a substantial chunk going to folks in low and middle income countries. We've seen historically that groups in these geographies probably have been under-resourced. And the goal of this sort of infrastructure approach to investing is not only to make the cost of doing evidence synthesis lower by reducing duplication and making the work more efficient to do, but also making sure that the folks who are closest to the problems do actually have the resource to leverage this new infrastructure and then focus on the stuff that really matters for their local context. That's it for me. I'm really enthusiastic about this community, and I think what the promise for the next sort of 6 to 12 months is. I think I'm sort of borrowing a bit of John's enthusiasm for this topic as well. It's clear it's an area that's been worked on for a while before Wellcome got involved. But if Wellcome can be of service to this community, and I feel like we can be, it's our pleasure and privilege to do that. And I'm always here if you want to drop me a line or ask any questions about what we're up to. But I'll leave it there, and I can stick around for a little bit if there are any kind of immediate questions. But I'll move on and let you guys get on with work.
Thank you, Tarek, very much, and thank you for your enthusiasm. I think we all carefully enthusiastic. It's an opportunity that we've been looking forward to have for quite a long time. I don't know if anyone can check on the chat if there is any immediate question to Tarek before he leaves us. Will, Zoe, can you just have a look on the chat for me, please? Because I cannot see the chat.
I think we're fine. And I would imagine people probably want time to digest that. But certainly there's nothing in chat so far. And Tarek, very much.
Thank you, Tarek. We're actually going to go back to you with some questions if people have questions that they've asked throughout the meeting. Sorry, Will.
While I have the floor, as it were, we had a technical problem. We had a last minute move of who was responsible for organizing this meeting for reasons outside of our control. Only 100 people have been able to join the call up to now. That restriction has now been lifted, and we're just working out how we can message everybody else who is expecting to get in to make sure they get in. So please bear with us on that. And if any of your colleagues have been affected by this, please let them know that they should now be able to join.
Yeah, and also that we are recording the whole meeting, the whole session, and we'll make the recording available as well at the website. Tarek, thank you very much for your help, and if you want to stay with us, please feel free to participate. So I'm going to share my slides again. And this part of the conversation is very much just to give you some heads up of the work that you are going to do going forward. And as Will said, we might have smaller groups than we planned because of the technical issues. But the hope is that we'll be able to start talking about the working and the planning groups. So the 5 working groups, they are aligned to the Wellcome definition of the evidence synthesis infrastructure. And they have been shared widely in our conversations and webinars before. One of the working groups is about the demand side. And this means that how do we engage to the ones that there are potential users of the work that we produce to understand and meet their needs. The second working group is the data sharing and reuse, and is how we make it normal to study a question once only and use the answers many times in many different contexts. The third working group is about safe and responsible use of artificial intelligence, and is really bringing evidence synthesis to the forefront of technology so that we can all get the best impact from the people and resource we have. Working group 4 is about methods and process innovation. And here I say, there has been over 100 people signed for this particular working group. So there's a lot of interest. And our intention is that this working group will discuss synthesis methods and process that enable radically more timely, relevant, and affordable synthesis to be produced. And the last but not least is about capacity sharing, building a global synthesis community with the capabilities to deliver comprehensive evidence synthesis across all major social questions. So, and we realized that in order to really deliver on these 5 working groups, there are a number of things that needs to happen, and these are what we are calling the planning groups. So the planning groups, the aim is to support the process, and it is aligned with the wider evidence synthesis infrastructure collaborative. We will have a planning group on governance that really divides options from how the global synthesis community can continue to set and achieve shared goals beyond the process that is currently being planned. We have one about partner engagement that work with other evidence communities to build a stronger global evidence support system. One about communication that will help us ensure effective internal and external communication. One about change management. We know that this is a change on the way we operate and the way many of our organizations work. So we've decided that it was important that we take into account and to support the change, the behavior change that are needed in order to make this process as collaborative as possible. And last, monitoring, evaluation, and learning. Understand and help improve the effectiveness and value for money for these works. So what we want from you today is you all have been assigned to breakout groups according to your preference, and as much as possible, we try to take into account your first choice. Each breakout group will have 1 or 2 facilitators, depending on the size of the group. And the role of the facilitators will be to guide the discussion on this specific meeting, ensure diverse perspective, and help the group agree on top 5 key priorities. Just highlighted in bold, the facilitators are supporting us for this particular webinar. It does not mean that these are the people that will facilitate the working groups going forward. This is going to be an open process that we'll discuss later. But the key thing about these groups today is really to discuss. So you have 40 minutes, as I mentioned before, to discuss the purpose of the group and come up with one slide that define the 5 key priorities for this particular group. We, however, know that this discussion will be much more than 5 key priorities, and we will collect all the notes that will help us inform the next steps. We have now launched the website, and on which we'll provide updates. We'll provide updates about the survey, but there is also a new form in the website that allow you to ask any question. It can even be anonymous if it's what you prefer. So I'm going to stop sharing my screen now, and I'm going to ask Santita if she can help us with the working groups. All right. I think now we have everyone. Thank you very much. I think we will use the next half an hour to get feedback from the groups. Although we proposed some facilitators, I know that some groups have changed who are the facilitators. So I'm going to call per group. And please, while your colleagues are speaking, if you have any comments or any suggestions, please remember to use the chat box as well. Working group 1 on demand side engagement. Can you?
Hi, Carla. Yes.
Great, wonderful. Go
We're
on,
here.
Amanda.
Sure. I'm going to just share my screen. Please just give me a moment. Fantastic. Thank you very much. We were still wrapping up some discussions when we were raptured back to the main room. So I'm going to try and distill that. But in essence, we agreed that our group purpose is that we need to understand how do we engage with those that are potential users of evidence to understand and meet their needs. And that would be looking at the pool side of evidence synthesis, so addressing questions generated from government or other actors, or what we called people not like us. And we'll workshop that term probably a little bit more. And then in terms of our top 5-ish ideas, we need to define or consider users or potential users, their types, so thinking about whether they're public or institutional, and whether they're highly evidence literate or less literate, and then also understand how to collect their needs and ensure that the evidence generated is useful to them and to build their capacity to communicate their needs. Then also to get users to engage with each other to reduce the duplication of need and therefore reduce the duplication of evidence synthesis, building demand for evidence, and also then relatedly targeting agnostic or knowledge resistant users. and defining question prioritization to ensure that the most questions are being addressed with finite resources at our disposal. But also some other notes that were coming through were around engaging the full strength of our networks, and also setting up kind of rules of engagement of how do we deal with these engagements and prioritizations and eventually knowledge translation. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Amanda. Good work. And just a reminder to all of you, if you had more notes in your working group, please share them with Santina. She'll collect the notes for us, and we'll be able to share with everyone the notes of everyone. So you don't need to take notes from the other working groups.
I was the volunteer, temporary, or facilitator.
Great,
My name's Pablo Barudi.
Excellent. Thank you very much.
No problem. I'm not in a position to share my screen because I'm on my phone, unfortunately, but I have been taking notes, and we didn't quite get to the end of the task, which was to develop those priority areas. But we started by trying to first map out who the demand side were that we were trying to engage with, and then some of the challenges, and then hopefully the priorities can flow fairly naturally from that. So in our group, by and large, and as you'd expect, most of the people were involved in help and trying to influence policymakers. There were some odd ones like myself out where I work on a sustainable finance library, so trying to influence the finance sector. There was someone who was focused on a platform that would then allow that synthesis to flow from other groups as well as their own, and so not doing necessarily the synthesis directly, but being able to provide those living guidance and documents and provide the platform for that. And then we also had someone who was supporting people who were creating the evidence-based synthesis to improve their processes. And so a range of demand side that each of us had, but by and large it was government. In terms of policy, in terms of challenges, there were many, as I'm sure you can imagine why we're here. A key one is the lack of institutionalization on the inside of the governments globally, and we had people from around the world in our group to be able to carry this work forward. And so both in the sense of implementation, not having the knowledge in the right domains, but also sort of being seen as project-based as opposed to being an ongoing part of policy development. There was challenges around different audiences, and so even within the health domain, there were payers, patients, clinicians, so different target groups that are using different evidence for good reasons often, but that obviously that disconnection is problematic. And there was one point which I thought was quite interesting, which I think would be worthy of further exploration in different meetings, is the increasing amount of resistance to evidence-based policy reform, and we see that in lots of different domains. You're seeing it with the hurricanes in the United States at the moment. Like it seems like evidence is becoming less valued, and so that is obviously a big challenge for those of us who are trying to promote more evidence-based decision making. Probably the main challenges. Then there was obviously I think some really important ones, issues of trust. So academics being seen as having an agenda in terms of the policymakers maybe having different priorities as well, and not speaking the same language. And so there is a communication and translation challenge there. I think that probably covers the broad strokes, and then priorities hopefully would flow fairly naturally from some of those challenges in terms of trying to improve trust, try and increase the permanence of the people within the government side to be able to use evidence-based policy effectively, and then also dealing with some of that resistance and why that's occurring.
Thanks.
Hopefully I've captured that for those that were on the group. I apologize if I didn't.
We would appreciate if you really share the notes with us as well. I think it's a good discussion, and it will help us, enormously to get more the flavor of the discussion. I'm going to go to working group 2.
Great. So we had a really positive discussion. I think people agreed that generally speaking, the group's purpose was really clear. rated between 3 and 5 on the 5-point rating scale. And then we came up with 5 key priorities or questions, but each of them have quite a few sub-questions. So we've cheated a little bit here. So the first question is, who do we need to talk to? And thinking about how we engage primary research producers, investigators, evidence users, and funders in the discussion. So it isn't just synthesizers talking to each other. Second question is about the actual data that we're talking about here. So it could range all the way from raw data from primary studies to the kind of the data extraction, risk of bias that we think probably is where a lot of quick wins lie, but also needing to think about the context specificity of the data, and whether it also includes things like the decision-making data from within the review process. Third area of interest was around data governance, so particularly thinking about what coordination would be required on interoperability, where those shared wins exist, and also on the licensing of data. So how open access do you go, and the challenges of making things really open access while also being as sustainable as possible. Fourth area is around data quality, particularly how we build trust, how we might draw on existing standards of evidence, and also ensuring recency in the data that's being collected and applicability to recent questions. And then fifth, there's a load of practical questions about how this actually happens. So thinking about quick wins for coalition building, what those appropriate coalitions look like, either across or within sectors, and then things like the platforms that would be needed for sharing, and also importantly, how we know whether this is being successful. So monitoring and evaluation of these approaches. So I'll stop there.
That's excellent. Thank you, John. Some of the issues that you mentioned are going to be considered also about the planning group. So the cross sections is also good.
So I, of course, had the best group. Not that it's a competition, but it is.
Always great.
Always. And I also have a slide that I'm hoping we can share. And Pablo, we totally agree with you. We were also talking about trust and how that you need a culture of even valuing evidence for this to even get off the ground. So we totally hear you. So I'm so sorry we slightly overlap with some of the other working groups. We started by talking about before you can even have the data. So this is a data sharing and reuse group, by the way. So if you even want to share data, you need to make sure that the data are relevant, so that the questions are not just questions that are, one in my group painted this lovely picture, right? You can't just have the people in the mountain ask the question. You also need to align it with the people in the city, right? So that you're actually getting people what they want. So we really need to think about who's asking the questions, and because those will lead to the data. And then, as I mentioned, it needs to be relevant. We had a diverse group. So there are countries in Africa, and then there are countries in Europe, and maybe it's not the same thing that they need. Again, we need to make sure that the data are actually relevant. And also sometimes it's not necessarily the effect of an intervention, it's more of the context in the country. So maybe it's other data as well that might be necessary that we need to share. Then we were talking about this nice future where everything is standardized and every data set has a code book and we all work on it and it gets better and better over time. And that would be such a nice future state. But we also were talking about that maybe we're not quite there yet, and maybe the incentives that we have today are not supporting that. They are supporting that you do your own thing and that you salami slice it and that you get as many publications out of it as you can. So we think there's such a need for finding good incentives for people to even want to share the data. And also, of course, the logistics around how do we do that? How do we ensure it's not just the big ones that do the thing, the universities that we all know very well that already do this very nicely? How do we ensure that also some of the other players get to share their data and also get to pull down the data that they need? And where do we even put them? Like, is there a repository? How do we do that? And then we were talking about all of this maybe needs to be framed around more of a logic model around how do we even do this with the sharing, right? So much is already known and so much can be learned about how to do it. So that, I hope, was a very fair summary. Otherwise, I will leave it to other members of the group for the things that I forgot.
Thank you very much. I mean, I should say, if you have other comments that you want to add to the chat, please do so. We're going to crack on because we have a lot of groups to go through, but we really want to collate all the information that you've been sharing with us. The working group 3. If you try to speak, you're on mute.
Thank you. Sorry, it keeps remuting me. Thank you very much. Again, I think there's quite a bit of overlap with some of the discussion that's already happened. We had a really interesting conversation about the purpose of the group being obviously to guide the safe and responsible use of AI, and we identified a lot of priorities and that had to distill them down a bit. But we felt, firstly, understanding what work's already being undertaken across the evidence ecosystem, thinking about both methods, the tools, the different use cases, so understanding who's currently using it, what are they using it for, and why are they turning to AI-generated evidence, taking the opportunity to connect with others. We want to benefit from existing work and make sure we're not reinventing the wheel. And also to really get a better understanding for what the potential for AI is in evidence synthesis, because there's a lot of hyperbole, but it's useful to understand what the real realistic use cases are and timelines are going forward. Trust came up in our group as well, so really understanding what decision makers need to be able to trust evidence that's generated automatically. Excuse me. Because even if we have the best possible AI tools, if people don't trust them, they're not going to use them. So also getting a feel for what kind of extent of automation is tolerable to end users or evidence producers. And it's not noted here, but conversely, we did have a conversation about how in some cases end users perhaps aren't very aware, of how unreliable evidence may be. And so there's also a potential role for thinking about how we educate the community of end users on how they can better make decisions about whether a tool is trustworthy or not. Identifying questions and issues that are related to the safe and responsible use of AI, so things like data security, privacy, governance, and regulatory issues around data sharing. And they're not necessarily questions, I think, for the group to answer, but certainly questions, I think, for the group to identify and perhaps engage in conversations with other people who do have expertise in those spaces. I think that we thought there was an opportunity to identify low-hanging fruit. So, where are the opportunities that AI can add value already at very low risk and build trust in the community and add value in the shorter term? And conversely, where are the areas where we're really quite concerned about the potential for AI to reliably perform certain tasks, and are there strategies to mitigate those, or are there areas where we just perhaps shouldn't be engaging with it? And then I think a big question, and it comes back to that trust issue again, is how do we make sure that AI systems that are being used or promote AI systems that are transparent and interpretable, so that we can understand how decisions are being made by tools, so to help us make decisions about whether or not we trust the evidence that's being produced.
Thank you very much.
Anyone in the
It's similar to the discussion in the morning as well, so it's great. We're going to collate all this information.
Yes, thank you. So I hope you can see my screen now.
Yes, we can.
Okay, perfect. So we discussed, there were some discussions around the purpose of the group, and we agreed that the purpose of the working group 3 is about figuring on how to use the AI. So in terms of identifying and defining the precise AI tools that the evidence synthesis community might need for different steps of evidence synthesis. For example, locating the full text for these resources, and also probably talking about credibility risk. The job obviously is to convince the evidence synthesis community that AI tools, they are powerful, useful, and a big thing for evidence synthesis. What the group is not intended to work on is establishing guidelines for the responsible and safe use of AI, as the work is already ongoing around this. The group agreed on top 5 questions and priorities. So the first one being, how can we develop a technological environment that allows the evidence synthesis community to easily adopt the new technologies? The second one was, how can we leverage the global community to enhance the AI use? The third being, how do we ensure AI tools are accessible to everyone? This is around cost as well, and considering barriers around infrastructure needed for evidence synthesis in the various contexts. The fourth one being, what opportunities does AI present to transform the current evidence synthesis production paradigm? For example, issues related to paywall can be addressed through AI use, or examining technologies in relation to human tasks that might help us to rethink how to utilize technology throughout and using the AI processes. Fifth one being, how can we ensure that the AI tools outputs are explainable and understandable for the local community? And we also had one around what minimal testing is required before deploying the AI tools, specifically around establishing benchmark for each of these tasks is quite essential. Thank you.
That's fantastic. And I see that you have a lot of notes for us, Ashrita. Thank you very much. I'm going to move on to the working group 4, Miranda and Daniela.
Thank you. So we had a lot of discussion. It was a really interesting conversation, and this is really just a couple of points from it. So I'll feed back the longer notes. But we really had a lot of people who were, our discussion was really about how the group would be an opportunity to bring together people with a really strong interest in methods, which we clearly and very quickly discovered is a very broad umbrella. There's a lot of methods going on, lots of people working in different areas in different ways, but that this group would really help us come together and discuss how our work interconnects and how we can use methods to achieve the objectives of the broader project. We have a really strong feeling that quality assurance and validity is going to be an ongoing key. It's a key factor right now in systematic reviews, and will continue to be so as we innovate in methods and processes. There's a lot of opportunities to consider improvement and innovation in workflows and in efficiency, but we also had a lot of discussion about needing to balance unnecessary duplication with necessary replication and contextualization of the information, so that sometimes you do need to do things again in different ways to learn from it or to make it appropriate to the questions that need to be answered. There's a lot of interest in collaborating across fields. So there's people working on very diverse types of methods, and also people working across health, environment, education, and so on. And our methods, language is very different. Our methods are very different. And sometimes there's really good reasons for that. So there's opportunities for us to learn from each other, collaborate and complement each other there. And really big opportunities to test and learn from methods innovation. So there's a lot of ideas about how we can improve what we're doing or innovate, introduce whole new methods, but that we can learn from that through methodological research, building methods research into the systematic review work and so on, so we can keep learning, understand better what areas of methods can change, or where it does or doesn't matter if you do it one way or another, so that there was some opportunities to build on our knowledge there. And also just finally, we started talking about things that were principles and ways of working, and that equity and inclusion, access were going to be really important, and generally collaboration across all of the different interests and areas of work within methods, and also more broadly to make sure that we're all working together, pulling in the same direction, or at least complementary directions. I think that was.
Thanks, Mira. This is really, really good.
Okay, we talked a lot about quality assurance and the need to make sure that whatever we do, it's of sufficient quality. And there's some of the group that are thinking that some of the quality of reviews is diminished, and that when you get large collaboratives like this, one of the main things that needs to happen is to make sure that quality stays there. And we have to find ways to do this at speed as well, which is a huge challenge. AI and large language models offer opportunities, but again, accuracy is a major part of this. And when you create a black box, it's really difficult to know what's in it. So we do have to validate these. One interesting point that was brought up is that doing methods by hand has its benefits, like you actually see what's going on. And in some ways, that's, I think, in a way how innovation happens. If we automate everything, we're going to lose the in a sense, a pipeline of human experts that know how these things work, and can adapt and innovate through that knowledge. So our challenge is not just to produce reviews, but to find ways also to contextualize them to person, place, and time. So it's one thing to just produce a static or even a living review, but if its contents can't be adapted to the unique context that people need to use them in, policymakers, et cetera, including content expertise, in that, then it's going to operate at probably too high a level. And finding ways to bring along groups other than the major three on this initiative was brought up as well. That needs to be inclusive and probably transparent about how that inclusion is happening. I think I said that next point about content expertise, not just methods expertise. The best reviews I find are when it's put through a content expertise lens. And then a final point was the idea of democratizing access to a suite of high quality open source tools, potentially that automate a lot of the process. And we talked about a lot of other things, but there's only so much time.
But we would be happy to hear all your, to get all your notes as well, if possible, to share with us. Thank you very much. And noted, we are looking at the concrete ways that this is more democratic. So it's noted as well that the issue about the three organizations. I'm going to go to the working group 5 that's about capacity sharing. Any facilitator? Oh, okay, good.
DK is facilitator, and I think he has notes. Yeah.
I'm jumping in for group 5. It is really interesting to see that most of the discussions that was going on in our group have been touched on a bit by almost all the groups. Part of the stuff we discussed, we started with one about capacity sharing, not just being a tokenistic measures to satisfy the demand for globalization and equity, but really be a capacity sharing that looked at where the capacity need is, and then where the demand side of things is coming from, so that the need for capacity sharing is co-created. We discussed a little bit about this being evidence ecosystem, and where the need for capacity is going to should actually be informed by the people having the need, and not other people that say, okay, we have been doing this here, and then the other persons are not doing it, then we need to train them up without first understanding whether that is a training priority or the capacity priority of the individuals. So we should make sure that capacity sharing is not tokenistic. It has to be co-created with equal power, and some kind of issue actually be initiated by the people who need the capacity. We then went on to arrive at point 2, and we talked about capacity strengthening, not being an ad hoc something or an acute intervention, and then people go away without a follow-up. We want to see a sustainable capacity sharing that leads to not just kickstarting of capacity development, but sustenance, such that more opportunities are created for individuals to actually test run the capacity that they have learned, such that they go on to train other people and then develop robust capacity. And the people whose capacity were developed then become experts who then train other people. It's not a situation whereby capacity sharing has to just be one-sided. People have the need to always take on capacity learning and not ever developing upward. So the way to doing that is to make it sustainable, giving equal opportunity for people to test and develop capacity further by sustainable funding, for instance, for people that have developed capacity to go on to test run it in whatever capacity that have been developed. Then the third point we brought up from our group was the need for more targeted development training. We understood the training opportunities by Campbell, by Cochrane, and all that. Student level kind of training, author kind of training, clinician kind of training. These tend to be like somewhat generic. And what happens is that the individual's capacity, like what people really need, are not identified from different say country, different settings, and then targeted. So we understand the very need for more targeted capacity development. And the last but not the least is actually focus on what Group 1 talks about, which is demand side of things. We said that whatever capacity sharing should actually be reflect the demand side of things, should come from the people who need it. I think when we come to the point, we actually say we want to see what Group 1 comes out with, because this discussion actually talks about demand side of things. Yes, capacity development should actually be informed by the people who need capacity development, much same as what we said in one, but just in a different kind of rephrasing. So that is us coming from Group 5. I think there will be more, or there are actually more that was in our mind, and Vivian and others can actually chip in other things if I have not exhausted it. Thank you.
Very rich discussion, and again, please share with us all the comments so that we can actually incorporate them. Working Group 5, Bianca and Tamara.
Perfect. So in a nutshell, on the purpose, we were a little bit more on the 2 to 3 side of this one. We even as we discussed in those short minutes, we started to not understand what capacity sharing, development, building meant. So comments on the purpose. One of the questions, maybe cross-cutting for all of the groups, is what does success look like? When would the job of the working group be complete? We thought the purpose might help if it was more action-oriented, so feasible to see how we would actually build this collaboration, focused on collaboration. We also thought social questions is very broad, and wondered if, is this about SDGs? Can we be a bit more explicit about what we mean by these? And maybe that's just further work in the next priorities. So in terms of top questions, we also thought capacity sharing or capacity building or learning generally is cross-cutting for all working groups. So whether you're in governance or AI or demand side, there's people need to learn things. And is that what the purpose of this group is? So the clarity of the purpose again, or are we only focused on conducting reviews? So how do we share and work across groups as a cross-cutting thing? We wanted to define what is capacity we need to build or share, and who needs to share this and know this and learn this. I'm just looking at the bolded sections. Or actually, the other thing I did mention was the clarifying the terminology. And then we thought there might be a space for taking stock, asking people, number one, what they need to learn about, what they can themselves share with others in terms of their own learning, perhaps. I'm using different terms now again. And then taking stock of whatever's out there to see how do we kind of link that up and make that the infrastructure on how do we improve the connections there. I think that there were some other points, and I'll share the notes with others afterwards. Thanks very much.
Thank you, Tamara, for this very thought-provoking. That's what we wanted these groups to shake us up and help building something that we all are part of. So thank you. Because we had less people signing up for the planning groups, we've actually grouped them in two different groups. One that was looking at governance and the monitoring, evaluation, and the change management. And that's the one that we're talking now, and Jill and Mamui that were facilitators.
Thanks, Carla, and I'm feeling very inferior because I don't have a slide to share, but I was the only facilitator and we had 3 things to talk about. So I shall be as eloquent as I can be, and I'll show you all the notes afterwards. So we were looking at governance, change management, monitoring, evaluation, and learning, okay? And within that, across everything, we decided we needed some sort of fact-finding exercise or baseline assessment exercise, or as Tamara's just said, some sort of stock take. So it sounds as though that's going to be quite important for a number of areas. And we thought we needed to find out things like what governance systems are already in place, what change management has worked in the past, what measures are currently collected of efficiency, etc., what data systems are being used now. So, you know, to move things forward, we need to find out a number of things about what's going on already. So then briefly, in relation to governance, we had some questions which were, how do we agree shared goals? How do we build trust and transparency? Recognizing there are competing interests and competing masters or mistresses of the system that we have to take into account. Change management, we talked quite a bit about this. What model of change management do we want to use? There's lots of different ways to do that, and how do we build better bridges between the various groups? Key bit was, is this going to need resources? Is it going to need money, either to build capacity or as an incentive? And my experience over the years is that money is one of the best incentives for change. It shouldn't be, but it often is. And then the last bit, monitoring, evaluation, and learning. Obviously, it's in our DNA to do this, isn't it? That's key to all of us. So we need to agree, once we've done this baseline assessment, what measures and systems should we use to make data collection efficient and iterative, so we can build a learning model from within that. So it's partly a developmental system as well as just collecting the data for data's sake. Hope I've captured it all. As I say, I've got more notes.
That's really fantastic, Jill. You did a good work, and we'll be very happy to get all the notes, please. Thank you, Ruth, for being so organized. And so that's the first one.
Thank you very much. And Thomas, please jump in if I miss anything. So we were a combined group. So when we talked about how clear the purpose is, you can imagine we got a little bit mixed up because we were talking about many groups. And I think the key things here were just to say we're not sure yet. It's very early days. Whilst we had quite clear ideas about governance and change management and monitoring, evaluation and learning, we weren't sure what we were applying those to yet, like on what and for what. And scores kind of came in between 2 and 4. So that just gives you a sense of where we're up to. And then you'll see that we weren't very good at getting 5 questions. And I started off with a long list of bullet points and I just shrunk them smaller and smaller. But I think it's fair to say that the questions that came up were around, what is this for? Why? Like, do we have an understanding of the end vision yet? And that will really help. There was quite a lot of comments and questions around who, where do funders fit? Who is in the evidence synthesis community? And who else should we be engaging with who maybe isn't in our community? And then lots of questions about how. How can we make sure we learn from what we've already done? How are we actually going to achieve this? Can we put it in smaller chunks? How can we make sure innovation is still happening? How do we manage dissent? We're not all going to agree with each other, and there's different levels of power amongst individuals and groups. And how can we keep this open so it isn't just about those of us who are here, isn't just about the big 3. And of course, that means sharing the work out as well, because we realized that you guys have been doing lots. So I hope that's a fair summary. And thank you very much to everyone.
I love the small printing. I hope that we'll get the small printing as well, Can't read it.
You can read that, just for you, Carla.
Can't read it. Thank you very much. And our last planning group was engagement and communication, partner engagement and communication.
Yeah, so that was my group. We were quite a small but mighty group, though it sounds like we could have been combined. with Ruth's group because we had very similar conversations. So for the group purpose, we came in with a much smaller, a much kind of lower rating of about an average of about 1.5. Though I think everyone in the group understood, you know, what communication is, what partnership engagement is. There really was a missing direction about kind of who are we engaging, what are we engaging for, what are we communicating, and a lot of questions about how the working groups and the planning groups would work together. I think that led to a lot of the low ratings, as well as thinking about how some of the planning groups work together when, you know, with some of Ruth's questions, I think alluded to many of these elements feel very linked to one another. In terms of priorities, a few key things came up, ideas about stakeholder mapping, including kind of a better understanding of who's already at the table. Expectations, setting expectations for partnerships, both for those who are included, but also for those who we would wish to engage with, and creating the why for partners. A big conversation around equity, both about who gets engaged, who counts as a partner, and also about how they may get categorized for engagement. And then some questions about, you know, setting internal communication approaches, what kinds of tools get used, how much do we communicate, what approaches get used in ways that don't overwhelm people and recognize that everybody also has a day job that they're trying to do in addition to this, and how equity flows through the internal communication approaches as well.
And then we got engagement and communication together, and that is the planning group 2 and 3, and Claudia and Nikita were facilitating this group.
Yes, can you see my screen?
Yes, we can.
Okay, so we have a combination, yes, of 2 planning group, PG2 partner engagement and PG3 communication. We have a very small group, around 7 people join. What was clear is that the purposes of both groups were not really clear, in the sense that we got scores around 3 and 4, asking about the clarity of them. And probably that's because we mostly see planning group 2 and planning group 3 as support group to other partners and working group. So as you can see here, like our key priorities are based on the need to define what is first a stronger global evidence support system, what do we mean by stronger, and like who are our partners, the need of a definition as well, define which kind of resources we will need to promote partner engagement, deliver a plan to build a stronger collaboration. And we feel like after we define all this stuff, we can start to develop a shared agenda, start to talk about an effective collaboration. But first we need to set like the definition of what we want and what are our targets as well. That's similar actually for the communication part, because without understanding like key priorities from partners, what like our partners want, we cannot define a target to develop like a tailored communication strategy for them. So like we didn't write all the 5 key priorities because yeah, basically we need definition for that as well. So we need to understand key priorities for partners. We need to, for sure, closely collaborating for the other working group and planning group to develop what are their targets as well. And then we need to ask our communication team to develop compelling narratives in a way to engage like any target we want to include in this project. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Claudia. This has been really very rich, and I really encourage all of you to please send your notes because we want to take all of this into account, and it's very helpful to us. I'm going to now pass to Will for some AOB and next steps. We had a brief discussion about that, and he's the best to summarize the next steps for all of us.
Thanks, Carla. Just to explain, this is me being punished for not having done enough work to help organize this meeting. We obviously didn't know what the groups would come out with in this session. So we obviously therefore don't know what the next steps are yet. This is the first of 2 meetings today. The other one for other time zones starts 11 hours later than this one. So we need to get the outputs from both of those meetings. But I want to just celebrate that I think this meeting was a really important step forward. Firstly, we shared the work, and thank you to all of the facilitators who offered on just a few days' notice to step in and facilitate the groups, and thank you to everybody who contributed for substance. we see our role, the three of us, as helping this process happen. The content has to come from everybody, and we started making that shift today, and I think that's really important and something to celebrate. There are, I think, 3 areas for next steps. The first, obviously, is that we need to share the outputs of each of these groups in each of the 2 sessions for other people to feed in on and respond to. It will take a few days to edit the video and transcribe that to get the material together from the 2 sessions in one place for people to respond to. That will all go up on the website for people to see and respond to. So that's the first thing. Let's build on the conversations we've just had about the groups. The second thing is we need to start thinking about the practicalities of this process. Now we know that there's real appetite to set up these working groups and planning groups and take them forward, even if some of them aren't clear enough and there's work to be done to improve that. We need to start thinking about what will that process look like, and how will we support it. We're open-minded about that. I think the only thing we are pretty sure of at the moment is that each group needs to do 2 things, and this was referred to by some of the feedback. The first thing is understand the strengths that already exist in the community and do that fact-finding exercise. And the second thing is think about where do we go next. So we'll start thinking about that process, and we'll put something out to consult on and get feedback on that. And then the third thing is we need to start thinking about, and then we need to consult on a process for people to express interest in being part of and also co-chairing these groups and facilitating them and making them happen. Now, all of that's going to take a bit of time, I'd imagine, over the next couple of months to get that done. We've tried to go as quickly as possible from a state where 3 of us stood on stage and said we think a process like this should happen, to a state where there's a whole bunch of people talking about actually what would this look like and sharing the responsibility for that. We now need to take the time to make sure that's actually well defined, that there's collective opportunity to define it together, and we're ready to get going. So over the next month or 2, we would hope to go through these 3 steps, thinking about the content of a group, building on today's work, thinking about the process, and then thinking about the people who will be involved in that process. I hope that's okay as next steps. Obviously, we've got as much to digest as you have, because all of this was new to us. But thank you, everybody. I was really impressed, actually, by how much good thinking happened in a relatively short period of time. Zoe and Carla, is there anything you'd like to add?
Yeah, I'm going to ask John and Zoe if we have 2 minutes left, if there is anything that they would like to add.
Zoe?
Yes, John.
Oh, I was just going to turn it to Zoe. I'll just say a great conversation, one of what I anticipate will be many hundreds. So really great kickoff to get people's views about how do we start to do this collaboratively and together. Thank you.
Thanks, John. Zoe?
Nothing further, really. Just deep gratitude for everybody's engagement and looking forward to next steps.
Thank you all. This is really exciting, the meeting today. I mean, I'm really grateful. And we was wrong only in one thing. Some of the facilitators were asked 2 hours ago, and they said yes. So they didn't even have the weekend to think through. And so it's really amazing to see and I hope that at this point, we all, start building something that will take effort and will take time, but we're very committed to do it together. So thank you all very much. And we will keep the update, as Will said, after we had the second meeting. So please visit the website. It was built, it's a simple website, but that's the place we want as a placeholder for all this communication. Have a nice day. And for those of you that is evening, good evening, and thank you. Bye-bye.